We're going to have some fun today with some Q&A on finances, the different stages of life and how faith and purpose can influence your financial decisions. So it's going to be an interesting episode, so take notes, jot some things down, and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the All Things Financial Podcast. Trey Peterson and
Yelisey Coots,
where we help you win with your money so that you can win in life. And today we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing some Q&A, and we're going to shoot some questions to each other so people can learn more about us and so they can learn more about their money and finances.
But mostly about us.
Mostly about us. Number one, what was the very first job that you had, and what did you spend your first paycheck on?
The first job I had, I was working at the New York State Fairgrounds in upstate New York.
I didn't know this. This is news to me.
2 weeks. I was working at a place, they made Philly cheesesteaks. I mostly washed dishes, peeled potatoes, made French fries. That was my first job.
I can't believe you gave that career up for this.
You know, it was a hard second, you know, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as far as what I did with the first paycheck, you know, it was probably so insignificant that I don't remember.
Okay, good. What got you into the financial industry, and what keeps you passionate about it? Hey, do you realize you just hit 10 years in financial services?
10 years, yeah.
July 1st.
I feel like I was always very much thinking about finances. To give you an example, I had my mom co-sign on a credit card for me. I think I was 15 or 16 years old, just so I could build my credit.
Yeah.
You know, for my parents, you know, they came here hoping to find the American dream, right? So they bought a house. Within 5 years, they paid it off. They did that because they worked 2 or 3 jobs. My dad worked nights for 18 years. Wow. So we did without a lot of things, a lot of the nice things that we would want to have, you know, some of the luxuries or comforts in life. Yeah. But they did that hoping to advance their position in life. And I feel like that's kind of carried over for me. Whether it's just like, I've always been a great saver. I've always like prioritized, even as a kid, making sure that, you know, my credit was good. It's not like I was going to buy anything, but I knew I needed good credit at that time. So I feel like it was just a natural progression for me. You know, I went to school, I studied business, got my MBA, and, you know, this is, you know, surprise, surprise, I became a financial advisor.
Yeah, that's great. What questions do you have for me? None.
I feel like I know everything. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I think maybe this is a good one for you. Was there a financial mistake that taught you a big lesson in life?
If you have my personality, which is more of like a sales type person, right? So one of the things about our partnership that's great is that our perspective and the way that we think is very different, which probably helps us understand more of our clients better, more of the world better. And so for me, as somebody that's always been more optimistic sales, is that I've always felt like I don't need to spend less money. I could just make more money. And I think that's true with a lot of salespeople. That's why when you look, a lot of people that go into real estate, insurance, investments, you know, people that go into higher income paying jobs, a lot of times those guys, whether they make $250,000 a year, $500,000 a year, or $1 million a year, as we've seen, a lot of them tend to live paycheck to paycheck. So I would say one of my biggest financial mistakes was when Steph and I first got married. I had sold a business. I took a break from business ownership. And if you've ever been burnt out on running a business, one of the best things I think you can do is actually take some time to go work for somebody else where your only responsibility is production. It's not somebody else's payroll. It's not managing people. It's not the risk. Sometimes it helps you just reset as an entrepreneur. And so I had a reset as an entrepreneur in 2015, right before I got married, sold a business that honestly had just struggled due to circumstances outside of me. And I was able to spend 2 years working for other people. But one of the mistakes I made is that during one of those transitions, I went from bringing in like $14,000 a month to $5,000 a month. I went from a commission structure to salary. My lifestyle was not set up for that. And one of the mistakes I made is that I continued with the same expenses that we had. And I spent 6 months running through our savings because my income dropped by 2/3. And so one of the things I would have done differently is, first of all, is I would have just gotten a different job. But the thing I would have done had I thought that was the spot I should have been in is I would have lowered my expenses by moving out of a luxury condo. I would have downsized my car. And so I never had a money problem until 6 months into marriage, my income got cut. And I stayed at that job thinking that the people I were working for were on my side. They were for me. And really they weren't. It put us in a bad spot where like for the first time in my life, I had a lack of finances because my income got cut by 2/3.
Yeah.
So if I were to do it again, what I would have done is I would have been more thoughtful that in the beginning of my marriage, not having to think about money would have been more helpful. And I would have changed jobs or changed companies so that I wouldn't have had to take that cut.
Just hearing you say that, one thing that it highlights for me is, sometimes we have these interruptions or things that happen in life.
Yeah.
Or
life doesn't always go how we think.
It doesn't go how you think, but you had an interruption or a change to your income that you experienced. It doesn't mean that you can just as quickly change your lifestyle. Right. Those things don't always go, they're not tandem. They don't go hand in hand together.
Right.
Those adjustments, and this firsthand, they're difficult to make, right? You've become accustomed to a certain way of living. Like you can't just on the fly adopt.
But especially if it's fixed, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a mortgage or rent or a car payment, like you're not choosing to lower your expenses the next month. Like you're hooked on those.
Right. And that's why the emergency fund, making sure you have enough to cover a certain amount of time, that's important. And I do think that the reason why I'm emphasizing this is how often do we have people who don't have any liquidity or don't have enough in emergency funds, right?
Yeah.
Life doesn't cooperate. Financial emergencies happen, things like that happen.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. Anyways.
So that was one of my mistakes. And I just learned like, I'm never going to put myself in a position again where my wife doesn't feel stable, secure. Our business coach, Keith Kraft, has a really good saying, and he says, if you want to win at life, you need to be surrounded by people that want to see you win in your life. And I've had seasons of my life that I thought I was with people that wanted to see me win, and really they wanted to see me go through something difficult. And so that's been a life lesson. And I think sometimes we just need to get around the right people to be successful, but also choose to have that emergency fund so that your life isn't spent thinking about money.
Okay, I think I have one more question that I think the viewers would be really interested in hearing about. Yeah. And what prompted me to ask this was, I met you in 2007 at ORU. We didn't really become friends until 2011. Mm-hmm. And I would say between 2007 and 2011, there were a lot of rumors that circulated about your background on campus. I heard all kinds of things. And so people have heard a lot. You've mentioned a lot about, college, after college, your first career, things like that. But what about your early life? Where did you grow up? Did you come, were you fed from a silver spoon, an ivory tower? Tell us a little bit about that because.
No, what's so funny actually is when we went to college, long story short, my dad is a pastor. My mom is in ministry as a pastor. She does mostly marriage and family counseling. And so they never had high income jobs, but my dad knew that, and my mom knew that they were called to do ministry. So they did real estate on the side, which, as you know, as a real estate investor, you don't get rich overnight. But if you do things well and you steward it, compounding interest, time is on your side. So I remember where growing up, we ate peanut butter and jelly so that they could give to missions. I remember eating Hamburger Helper, which is like the worst thing that you can eat, probably the cheapest, but also bad for your health. And I remember seeing my parents go from what I would say was like on the poor end to middle class, and then they've had some success beyond that through their real estate investments. But for me, I was thankful that I got to see that. What's funny is by the time I got into college, my parents had accumulated some properties and investments. One of my parents' dream was to buy us a vehicle when we went to college. And so they had bought us, or in high school, so they had bought us a car when we turned 16. And then my senior year of high school, I was driving a big truck and gas went to like $4 a gallon or whatever it was. And I was like, I can't even afford the gas. And so I traded in what they gave me and then used like $21,000 of my own money to buy a Corvette. And so I went into college driving a Corvette. What was so funny is there was somebody in college, their parents were very, very wealthy. And he was from California. And people started saying that I was that guy. And so I was driving a Corvette and everybody thought I came from this family that was worth like,
I remember hearing that.
I think $200 million.
Your grandfather was the CEO of some Fortune 500 company. I mean, all kinds of things. I was like, I got to get to know this guy.
I was treated really well.
Yeah, I was kicking myself for waiting 3 years to really become your friend.
Little did everybody know that my parents were pastors of just a wonderful small church in Minnesota. Yeah. They thought I was a part of that big family. I'm really thankful because I remember not having a lot.
Yeah.
And through discipline, through good stewardship, and through investing over time, my parents built a little bit of wealth. So one of the things I would say is, my mom grew up in a trailer park. My dad's dad was a hair barber, never made more than $30,000 in a year. And I think that if you grew up blue collar and not with a lot of money like you and I did, I think people think you either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we've found, which tends to be true, you have control over your life.
Right.
And that no matter where you come from, if you're disciplined, if you grow and get better, if you develop more skills, you can become a higher income person that can become the type of person that saves, invests, and actually builds stability and potentially something beyond that for your family. And I'm thankful that my parents, who both grew up with basically nothing, they made the decision that even though we were born this way, there's a quote, I think it's by Zig Ziglar, and he says that you and I are born looking like our parents, but we die looking more like our decisions. And so one of the things that I found is that you and I, doesn't matter if we come from a rich home or a broke home, we're going to look more like our decisions. And so if you've never come from a good background, you can make those changes and they don't happen overnight, but they can happen over time.
Both you and I have benefited from parents who made a lot of really good decisions, and we got to see that firsthand. And I definitely, I think it's great that you shared that.
Yeah, thank you. Question for you. One of the questions that people ask me is, where should I be at this season of my life? So if you have a 30-something, a 40-something, or a 50-something, kind of three-part question, if somebody's in their 30s, what does success look like at that season?
Fidelity has some stats that I think are pretty widely cited.
They do.
So according to Fidelity, by the age of 30, you should have one time your income saved up.
In your 401k.
In your 401k.
Investments.
Yes, your retirement savings. By the time you're at retirement, which Fidelity says is age 67, because that's full retirement age for anyone, at least according to Social Security, for anyone who was born after 1960. They recommend having 10 times your salary. You could see how these numbers could really fall apart quickly depending on...
Discourage you pretty fast.
Well, not even discouraged, but you could see how hey, expenses have changed over time. Spending habits change as you get older. Inflation doesn't affect every single category in the same way. So you might look at that and say, hey, 10 times my salary at 67 doesn't seem like a lot of money. Right?
Yeah,
and potentially you could live for 30 or 40 years in retirement. Would that be enough considering inflation and how your expenses might change? So there's a lot of room for conversation there, but it is a good place to start. Yeah. I would say if you're 30 years old and you have one time your salary saved up, like you're at least on the right track by one of the most widely respected and regarded studies that Fidelity has done. So
yeah, absolutely. What's one financial habit that's impacted or changed your life?
Saving and living within my means. Early on in life, I didn't know what my income was going to look like in the future, but I always assumed I'd be in a good spot and I'd get there no matter what.
Whatever it took.
If I had, and you hear about these guys that they work at the post office, but they, own a multifamily apartment building and they have a ton saved up. I was going to be that guy and living off of a shoestring budget if I needed to, because that was the objective for me. And I'm just wired that way. Thankfully, that hasn't been the case, but I've always made sure to live well within my means, saving, making sure that I'm being diligent in that area. And I think that for me, that's kind of been the recipe. I mean, obviously there's more we could talk about, but if I were to say a simple thing that I've done, living within my means, saving what I can.
Great. One of the things that I have learned is that I think it's easy to decide that there's only one way to be successful. I think everybody knows, but I've actually just found that to really not be true. What success is for me might not be success for you, right? I think of success is I want my life to be extremely exciting. I want to take calculated risks, and I always want to feel a sense of pressure that I'm forced to step up, get better, and work hard. And I don't know if it's just my personality. It's probably that, or the way that I grew up, or the fact that I was a part of a Division I, or not a Division I, I was a part of a wrestling team that was ranked second in the country, where I would just say the key there is that we outworked everybody. And for me, it's a little bit of, I always want to be uncomfortable. And for me, I'm, even as my wife Steph would say, and this isn't necessarily a positive thing, it's just me, is she would say, you're the least stressed when you have the most going on, is what she would say. I feel like God's given me gifts and talents, which I almost always feel behind on, by the way. But I don't want to die comfortable. I want to make sure that I'm always pushing it, which probably isn't always healthy. But for me, one of the things I've decided is that I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to have, our home is mostly paid for. 65% of our house is paid for, which at 37, I'm really thankful for. There's people our age, their whole home is paid for. But for me, I want to live in a way that I'm a good steward of what I have. I take good calculated risks, but I want to get to the end of my life and say, I took the risk and I pursued everything. And so for me, it's a little bit different than others. One of the things I've learned is that every time that you and I make a decision, we're not just making a decision for that moment. We're making a decision for how we make decisions in life. I've pre-decided that I'm never going to bet everything. I'm never going to bet the farm because I want my wife to be happy, feel secure, but I'm going to take a lot of risk. I'm going to be thoughtful about it. I'm going to put everything into it. And I would rather fail at 3 or 4 things a year and succeed in 6 than try at nothing and win at nothing. I had the opportunity a year and a half ago, to have dinner with John Maxwell. And he said something that I've always kind of known this, but it just stuck with me. He just said that he's around high achievers all the time, and they all want to talk about how much money they make. And he said, I don't want to hear about how much money you make. I want to hear about how much you give away. And so I've just decided, like, I want to be in a spot where I give the majority of what I earn away. And if I can earn more, and if I can have businesses that are dedicated towards generosity, that's how I want to live. I think part of the way that I do that is I overcommit to things, and I live in a way that looks chaotic to others. But I think for me, like, I'm happiest when there's the most chaos going on, where I think there's others that they would rather do things slower, even if it means they miss out on things, if their life is more peaceful. And so I would just say is every time I make a decision, I'm deciding for how I make decisions. And I wish I would have known that sooner.
What's one non-financial piece of advice that you would give that everybody should have in light of retirement, in preparation for retirement? What's one good piece of non-financial advice?
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that we see people make is that they wait until they retire to find out how they're going to spend their time in retirement. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a big mistake, because what we often see, especially if you're a high achiever, is that when you retire, if you haven't found your hobbies, or you haven't found the way that you're going to serve others, whether it's in a nonprofit, in your church, at the local humane society, whatever that looks like, if you haven't found it before you retire, we find that people will go 1, 3, 5 years and they don't find it, or it takes a long time. And instead of celebrating coming into a new season of retirement, they kind of walk through it without a purpose. So I would say that if you can find before you retire the way you're going to spend your money in retirement, that's one of the best ways to walk into retirement, with it being a celebration instead of feeling like a funeral.
That's spot on. One thing that we noticed, and it was very, I don't know, just kind of jarring at first. People would retire, they'd be counting down the days. It's like the most exciting thing in their life.
Yeah.
And then we meet with them in 3 months, and like all signs like look like depression, like as if they're experiencing like severe and very legitimate depression. And I think that there's a number of studies that have been written on the fact that retirement is one of the biggest events that happens in somebody's life. It's a very difficult transition for a lot of people. And one of the more alarming ones shows that, you know, the rate of divorce in retirement has like doubled or tripled or something like that since like the late 90s. And they actually have a term for it, a gray divorce. And I think that transition period is very abrupt for a lot of people. And it's because of what you said. Yeah. They haven't adjusted towards some of those things, whether it's an adjustment to like, hey, now I'm seeing my spouse every single day, to now I have, you know,
right.
What do you call it? 7 Saturdays. I forget how you say that.
6 Saturdays and a Sunday.
6 Saturdays and a Sunday, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes down to like not having real purpose and meaning in life and some of the things that you do. And I know that comes differently for some people. For some people, that's volunteer work. For some people, that's finding something that, you know, maybe they occupy their time having a part-time job, right? But maybe not out of necessity, but just something to, you know, to do.
Yeah. So we just hit 8 years, July 1st. It's been 8 years since you and I started this business together. What would you say that you've done, or that you do, or that you're doing, that's helped you shift from being somebody that's kind of like, I'll be happy when, versus enjoying the present today?
To be honest, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't think that I like struggle to enjoy the present. I think that because of the way I'm wired, I make the people around me struggle to enjoy the present sometimes, because of like, you know, my mind is a lot of times it's occupied with, you know, thinking
what's
about
right
the
now.
next day, or thinking about like, I wouldn't say that my life is nearly as chaotic as yours, but like for anyone else who doesn't know you, my life, you know, if it's not being compared to yours, probably seems very chaotic to other people too.
It's very full.
It's
right?
very full of things that, I think for most people, I don't know. I mean, I think it's like, hey, take your kids to soccer practice, show up at work on your 9 to 5, come back home, go to church and like rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of things that I'm pursuing, things that are interesting to me that, that I feel like for everybody else, maybe it makes it difficult for everyone to know that I'm enjoying life because I'm sometimes not always there.
I don't know that I've asked you this, so I'm actually interested in the answer. 36, 8 years into our business, you're doing other things on the side. What's the definition of success today for you?
Having the opportunities to do whatever I want. Like I said, it's not necessarily sometimes buying or purchasing something, but having that option and removing those limitations, because especially as like, I feel a very strong, like I'm compelled to take care of my parents. Like, I feel like that's like, I don't want to call it a burden, but I feel like, they come from a culture where like you can't have a conversation on like long-term care, nursing homes or things like that. A lot of that responsibility falls on me, and I don't want to begrudge that. I don't want to like look at it as a burden. I want to look at that as something that like, hey, I want to make sure that I have the option and the ability to take care of them no matter what that means. And I think I extend that even further, not just to them, but also to the rest of my family and even my wife's family. Like, I look at that and I take that seriously. So for me, just like removing those limitations and expanding the number of options I have, even if I'm not necessarily, going out and doing every single thing that, might seem like a bucket list item. I just want to have the option to.
Yeah.
But it's fueled by that, taking care of my family.
Yeah. Really good. I like asking you this question because you're great on stewardship of your finances, and you might be the only person I know that can look back 10 to 12 years and where every penny went. And I pick on you a lot for that, but it's also, I think, a great thing that you're driven by being a good steward of what God gives you. What does stewardship mean to you personally? Maybe talk about like the core value of it, and then practically what it looks like.
Everybody needs to be responsible for how they spend their money. I feel like there are many people who depend on that, right? Your immediate family. And I think what makes it very challenging is that when you talk to somebody about stewardship, it always comes down to their priorities, right? You meet two different people, they're going to have different priorities. So as a result, stewardship is going to look different for those people. Mm-hmm. I think at the end of the day, like, as you say, if you pre-decide on what those priorities are, I think it's just simply sticking to it. Right. If you decide that this is how much is spent on our retirement savings, right? If you follow whatever the norms are, whatever the recommended amounts are, this is how much we spend on vacation. And if you look at that and the trajectory is positive, where it's pushing you forward and not putting your family in a position where you're going to, deal with some hardships or just things like that, I think that it's important to do. It's important for everybody to do that, even though it might look differently from person to person. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's a responsibility that I feel like it should weigh a little more heavily on people than it does, because we're always having to contend with our preferences, the things that we want in life. And sometimes you want those things and you do it anyways, even if the budget doesn't allow for it. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's like not stewardship at all. Like, that bothers me. Yeah. And I have family members that live that way. And it's like, hey, I get the sentiment of like, you need to enjoy life too. Right.
We've earned this.
Yeah, we've earned this. So we need to enjoy life too. I don't want to just live and die without having, gone to Spain or whatever that is. The whole conversation of delayed gratification, like, that's something that nobody talks about anymore, especially in our culture, right?
Yeah, you go on Instagram, what does every reel say? The time won't return, but the money will.
Yeah, but except it doesn't, right? Because
well, that's what I mean.
We meet people at the other end who absolutely don't have
the money.
Return. And they're one financial emergency away from being in financial ruin, right? Or having to depend on somebody to help them. And it's like, hey, I get it. The vacation, the nice fancy vehicle, all that was fun while you had it. But now you don't, right? Now you're applying for Medicaid to help care for your expense, to pay for your expenses. So I think that, stewardship is very important. It's going to vary a lot between person to person. But I think that conversation on delayed gratification, we need to bring that back. There has to be an element of that. And it's really difficult to do, especially in this generation. I'll end with this quickly. But I have friends and family members that, there's something culturally that has just shifted, right? There isn't that same emphasis on provision, on being career driven. And I know that tends to ebb and flow based on how generations have abused that, right? We have, the baby boomers who've maybe worked a little bit to a fault. And now the children of the baby boomers, now they're not living to work anymore, right? You hear that a lot. Right. But I think that can easily go in the wrong direction, where you're not setting yourself up or your family for success later on in life.
Yeah, well said.
How do you help clients find peace in financial uncertainty, right? Because we run into that too. And sometimes their finances don't support whatever they're going through, but we still want to help them achieve peace.
Most of the people we meet, even the ones that were like disciplined, they had a plan for their life, they saved, a lot of them have the pieces for financial peace and success, but they don't have a plan. I think a lot of people go their whole life planning more for their vacations that they take every year than they do for their whole life. And so one of the things I would say is we help people develop a plan. We help people update their plan, and we help people adjust the plan when life doesn't go how you think it's going to go. Whether it's your or your spouse's health, whether it's the market having a downturn right before you retire, whether it's your business that's been successful, it's provided great income, that industry comes to a halt, and now all of a sudden you have to adjust careers or companies. The way that we help people is we help them create a life plan for their finances, and then we help them adjust that as life goes better, worse, or different than they expected. And so I would say one of the things that we do really well is we give people strategy in areas they haven't experienced before so that we can help them eliminate a lot of the concerns that they would have without us. And we can help them kind of point out like, hey, you're going to come up to this point in the next year or two that you've never experienced, but we've watched and walked dozens of people through this. Let's eliminate some of the mistakes that we've seen so many people make. And so I think one of the things that we do really well is that we give people a plan and we help eliminate a lot of the mistakes that can be really costly. And I think one of the things that surprised me in life is how many people can go 25, 30, 40 some years making all the right decisions, and then they make a bad decision that costs them decades of good decisions.
Catastrophic sometimes. Yeah.
And that's part of what drives you and I to help serve people so well is we want to help you continue the good decisions.
Yeah.
We met with somebody recently, high income earner, making $400,000 or $500,000 a year. Most of his life made $80,000 to $130,000 a year, which is good income. Over 35 years, had a couple $1 million in a 401k. In 2020, he got nervous, took half of it out of the market. And in the 4 years that it was sitting basically in a money market account, he would have doubled that money. So I think about how he spent 35 years, and half of what he spent 35 years putting away, saving, sacrificing for, how that would have doubled had he just had somebody like us to help him stick to the plan.
The cost of not making a decision.
So there's
a poor decision.
The cost of making a bad decision. Yeah. So if we can help you create a plan for your life and stick to the plan, you can make all the right decisions or 90%, but if you fail on a couple things or 10%, your life can look totally different. So for me, that's what it is. Helping people create and stick to a plan.
To kind of rephrase that question a little bit and hone in on something, what would you say to somebody who, when you're looking at their plan, whether it's a result of the poor decisions they've made or just life circumstances that have happened to them, or you can clearly show and you can see like, hey, the money doesn't last. The lifestyle you're currently living, you can't live it any longer. And the reason why I asked this, because we just kind of ran into this. And what we ended up recommending were some unconventional things that we typically don't recommend, but it was in light of their specific circumstances. And sometimes the advice is a little bit unusual and it's not something you're accustomed to, but you might have to course correct. And people are reluctant to give up their lifestyle even when we have these conversations. I mean, how do you respond to that?
We talk about mindset a lot. And sometimes when you talk about mindset, it can come across a little hokey, like, oh, I'm just going to wish my way into a better life.
Yeah.
But a good example of that is we had a couple recently, and their life was shook a little bit because they've been spending more than they should have been for a long time, despite our warnings. And a lot of times it seems like people don't realize they're on the wrong path until it's too late. One of the things I think that we help them realize is that they have enough assets to make it the rest of their life as long as they downsize their home, so eliminate one of their big costs, use the equity they have to pay cash for something. But the other thing I think is that even though one or both of them are going to have to work part-time for probably 8 or 10 years longer than they wanted, I think one of the things that we've helped people understand is we have a lot of families that we serve that financially they never have to go back to work, but they do because they're bored. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I would say to somebody is if you're in your early or mid 60s and you're running out of assets, is make the decision that you're going to enjoy that part-time job that you have to have, and tell yourself that even people that have money do it anyways.
Yeah.
And now, even though you need the money, you can go enjoy that work knowing that you need it, but also if you didn't, you might do it anyways.
Thankfully, that's not a common conversation that we're having. We're not,
Right.
that doesn't
sure.
represent many of our clients.
Most of our clients,
But when it does
okay.
represent that, we do have the difficult conversations, and we do try to help people, even in those circumstances when the conversations are difficult.
yeah.
One final question is, so if you hear this quote, what's your initial response to it? Splurge, you'll never regret it.
Man, we see a lot of the people that regret it, right?
Yeah.
One of the ways that I grew up is my dad, it would look like he splurged on something. And this is later in life. He didn't splurge on anything till he hit 50. Once he had enough assets, I think that he felt secure and knew that he was going to give a lot to the kids when he was gone. He decided he was going to enjoy some of it. But what I appreciated is that he would cut back on things, and then it would look like he randomly splurged, but it was thoughtful. And then he'd cut back again. And I remember growing up thinking, like, why do we not do anything like eating out, and then you purchased a new vehicle for the family? And he would point out the way that we were able to purchase the vehicle was by cutting back.
That's so funny you say that, because a lot of times when I'm getting ready to buy something big, my wife says, I don't want it if this means we're going to eat ramen for the next 2 weeks. Kind of the same thing, right?
Right. So anyway, so I would just say is that you can't live your life that way. You shouldn't splurge until you've had the discipline to be able to.
Okay.
All right, let's transition into the lightning round questions. Are you ready? What's your favorite coffee order?
Caramel latte, less milk, extra shot.
Nice.
Yours?
I don't drink coffee.
Oh, loser.
Favorite restaurant in Minneapolis?
The Burrow, North Loop.
What do you like about it?
I really like the octopus.
And we're boring. We love Fogo de Chao, Brazilian steakhouse for the win.
I don't know about that, but okay.
Favorite memory with your family?
Colorado. Love traveling with my family to Colorado.
Mine is anytime on a boat with my kids, anything on the water.
Best date with your wife.
My favorite date with my wife is when we get away from the kids.
Yeah.
Hotel, away from home, away from the kids. It's just us, and it feels like we're dating for the first time again.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I have 3 kids, you have 3 kids. Whenever you get away from the kids and it's just you and your
That's
spouse.
the best date.
It put me anywhere.
Favorite money-related book?
You know what? The first one I ever read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, when I was like 15. I feel like that inspired so much.
Mine would be Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It has more to do with how you think about money than it does the details of budgeting, etc.
All right, dream car.
Man, my dream, I've got like 10 of them.
I do too. I can't decide. I feel like this might have been easier a long time ago, but now it's, I don't know, maybe because the opportunities are a little more plentiful.
Yeah. I would say my dream car would probably be a Mercedes SLS convertible.
I do love those. That's on the list. I'm just going to say Porsche GT3 RS.
Dream vacation to destination.
Why don't you start with that one?
Mine is Bora Bora, but not till I get abs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was afraid you were going to say Bora Bora. For me, I don't know. It's much more simple. I don't need to be on a beach. They all kind of feel the same to me. Don't particularly love sand, but probably somewhere in the mountains.
One word to describe your relationship with money.
Stingy.
And don't say Scrooge.
No,
Man,
not
mine,
stingy. I would say generous for both of us. We're both generous,
For sure.
but then, the piece that we're not generous with, I feel like we have very different habits in terms of how we spend.
yeah, I think of money as a tool.
I think of money as a tool.
And for me,
That's where the differences, the similarities end.
and I want that tool to produce one of my core values, which is fun. Yours, security.
Yeah, I would probably say, yeah.
is great.
That's probably pretty accurate.
All right, final thoughts. One key takeaway from this Q&A. If you were to summarize this, you told somebody, hey, jump on the Q&A podcast. What do you want our viewers to get out of today's Q&A? What's the value that you add?
I think that as you listen to our podcast, we're going to talk about a lot of things that are maybe a little bit more technical. We're going to do a deep dive on very specific topics. And I think just like, when I listen to a podcast, I don't just want to know the information. I want to know who I'm getting it from. And our clients, they have similar concerns, right? They want to know who we are, who they're getting the information from. And I think that this adds a layer of personality, get to know us a little bit. And just, you get to know our heart behind some of these topics that are related to something that maybe isn't always comfortable to talk about, your finances.
My takeaway would be, if your natural default is to be a spender, likely if you're a CEO, you're in sales, you get gratification out of expanding your world and spending money. My number one would be is to buy some assets, real estate, investments, and to feel over 2, 3, 4 years what compounding interest looks like. Because one of the greatest things that's happened for me is that when I've seen my money grow, the satisfaction from that is actually even greater than buying the thing that I wanted the most. And so if you can connect in your mind that compounding interest and buying investments is even more exciting than buying things that don't grow, that actually go backwards, it was a life changer for me, because now one of the things I do is I love investing in real estate and in business because I've seen what they can produce for my life. So if you can make that shift, your whole life will be different. Thanks for joining us on the All Things Financial podcast, where we want to help you win with your money so that you can win in life. Thank you.
Advisory services are offered through CG Advisory Services, LLC, a registered investment advisor, and through Guardian Wealth Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. CG Advisory Services, LLC, and Guardian Wealth Strategies, LLC, are separate and unaffiliated entities. The topics discussed on this podcast are for educational purposes only and are not intended to be investment advice or recommendations. Listeners should consult with their own financial professionals before making any investment decisions.